Hi, this is Deboki, and today I'm going to do the part 2 of my reading and writing for fun in grad school series. The first part, which was about reading in grad school, that was about how kind of like the non-standard reading for fun things that like comic books and certain blogs really helped me out with getting better at being a sciencey grad student. In this video, I'm going to talk about how writing for fun helped me out, and specifically, I'm actually going to be talking about fan fiction, which might not seem like a thing that would help with science writing, but I swear it is. So yeah, if you want to watch the first video, I will link to it below. So let me just get one thing out of the way. Academic writing sucks. If you've done any kind of form of it, obviously if you've written essays in high school and college, those are painful. I feel like the writing that you have to do in grad school is somehow worse because you actually you probably like what you're writing about, but when you sit down to write it, it's like you have to take everything that you love about it and suck it out and then just leave the bare objective reality of what you're dealing with. And it's so weird because when you think about science and why people like it, there's all this beautiful language you can use to describe, I don't know, constellations or how cells work, and there's all this beautiful stuff going on, and then you have to write it for a journal or for a proposal or grants or whatever, I don't know. Whatever it is you end up writing for, it feels like you have to take out anything that makes it sound like what you're doing is fun just to make it sound smart or something. I don't know. It feels soul-sucking. Totally get why it is this way. I understand why we don't get to do it any other way, but it's also so frustrating and tedious and I like writing, but yeah, I don't really enjoy the process of academic writing. I like that it makes me understand what I'm working on better. I don't like the actual writing of the sentences. So actually, I came into grad school liking writing. I double majored in English and bioengineering in undergrad. I do enjoy writing, but as you can probably tell, I don't like a lot of the writing that I've had to do in grad school. But one of the things that I kind of accidentally realized, and that might be obvious to a lot of people, but for some reason to me was not, is that to get better at writing, if the writing you're doing in grad school is terrible, the best way to get better at it is to find something that you like writing and work on it there. And in my case, this actually ended up being fan fiction. So I mean, when I started writing fan fiction, I did not set out writing it to get better at grad school. Basically, all that happened was that I was my first year, I was really tired of being super stressed out, and in the middle of the night, I was just I have this idea for a story, so I spent a few hours typing it up and then posted it. And I just want to issue the caveat now that I'm not going to tell you anything about the fan fiction I wrote. I like keeping my fan fiction life and my real life separate. Fandom does have its ups and downs. There can be some really intense moments of drama, but mostly it's just people who really like a thing and who really want to talk about it or make up stories about it or draw pictures of it. So it's just I think it can be a really, really fun creative outlet for people. Especially for me, I mentioned, my first year was a little bit tough. I was kind of trying to work through some issues related to depression and anxiety, and fandom just really ended up giving me a creative outlet and community that was really meaningful and helpful and just also fun. And I was not looking to be a good writer when I started. Like I said, my first story, I think I pretty much wrote it in the middle of the night and immediately posted it. I think I did a 30-second typo check and just immediately put it online, which is not actually that dissimilar to how I wrote essays in college, right? Usually it was oh, I've got a deadline tomorrow, I'm gonna have to write this essay now in 2 hours, and hopefully my professor will not be too upset. Kind of like in college, the output that I produced was not terrible, but it wasn't good either. The difference between fan fiction and college is that your college professor has to read your essay. No one in fandom has to read your fan fiction. When you post a story, no one has to give a crap about it. So I think I kind of pretty quickly learned that my process needed some updating. For example, writer's block when you're writing a story for fun is very different from writer's block when you're writing for a class. Writer's block in college usually meant I just don't want to write this essay because I'd rather be at a party. Writer's block when you're writing a story for fun is usually this idea that I have, I don't know how I'm going to produce anything that lives up to it. Or I don't even know how to produce an idea that is even worth writing. I quickly learned that the only way to get through that is to give yourself the luxury of writing terribly. That means that you can't just write things 2 hours before. You have to write things like well in advance so that you can write the worst possible version of it and then give yourself time to improve. This is usually what I call my like word vomit draft. It's usually where I put on all the words that could possibly come to my head about a given scene, and basically it's almost like a letter to myself telling myself what's going to happen, as opposed to like the actual story that I want people to read. And when you realize that you can write a terrible draft that no one is going to read, that's actually incredibly liberating. It means that like you can just put whatever you want on the page. It doesn't have to be what's in the final version. It doesn't have to be even good. It just has to exist. The thing is that it also makes editing incredibly important, and editing was not a thing that I had been doing when I was writing my college essays. This was the first time that I really understood editing as a critical part of the writing process, really just as important as the writing itself, that it sometimes even takes longer than the writing, and that it's not just a way to like avoid, I don't know, like your professor covering your page in red circles. So over the past few years, I've had basically 3 major writing things that I think really illustrated to me what fanfic actually did for my academic grad student-y science-y writing. And I still have some more coming up, but these are the things that really hammered home how doing things that were not remotely related to grad school actually helped me a lot with grad school. So for example, I had to write a proposal for my grad program to explain my research, and then I also wrote 2 reviews related to my field. And over the course of those different writing things that I had to do, I actually started to really kind of hone in on a process that I think is still evolving. But at its core, I think what I really learned to do was just to write the worst possible draft I could, because what I would end up writing would end up having maybe like 20 to 30% similarity to my original draft. So again, like this is my word vomit draft where I actually call it my word vomit draft, and that's what it's sent to other people to read as, because it's just like the worst possible writing. Like the grammar is terrible, the sentences are all terrible, the ideas are not well formed, they're really just a mishmash of words that are like vomited onto the page for people to sift through. Like I said, the goal of this is not to write well. The goal is to get my ideas onto paper so that I can form them later. And the other thing that I've gotten from this is that by writing terribly, I'm actually much more open to criticism. When I write things that are supposed to be kind of the more final draft, even if I'm writing them at the last minute, I'm less open to the idea that it's terrible, because I still feel like, oh, but it's supposed to resemble something good. With a terrible word vomit draft, you're like, well, yeah, this is terrible. And so when people give you feedback on it, it's like, thank you. This is like what I need to kind of shape the terrible writing that I've put in front of you. This was a major issue for me starting grad school, and even after I started writing fanfic, it was hard. I tend to take criticism very personally. I don't know, just like kind of like a lot of the standard, I don't want to hear it. Like, yeah, I had a hard time with criticism. Writing fanfic helped me to see the value of people's criticism as a way to get better at writing. When I first started writing, I didn't have any beta readers. Over the course of different stories that I wrote, I did start getting beta readers, and I really started to understand how having another pair of eyes helped me to improve the story and the writing that I was doing. It also gave me a sense for what well-constructed and helpful criticism looks like, which I think has helped me a lot with understanding the different reading that I'm doing as well. Like when I read a paper, to kind of understand what it is that I'm having issues with, so that I can kind of look back and see how I want my own writing to look. By the time I actually wrote my last review, I was really frustrated because I wanted more criticism, which was kind of funny to me because I had started out like a few years ago just like breaking down at the sight of criticism. And so it's like, I feel like fanfic for me has been a huge part of that story of learning how to understand criticism and really use it to my own benefit. That people are not always nice, but most of the time, if they're taking the time to tell you what you can improve, it can actually be helpful. So fandom and fan fiction are hobbies that kind of draw a lot of judgment, and I sort of understand some of it, but I do think it's mostly fun. Just because they're not related to your work doesn't mean that you can't get any benefit from it. I don't really write fanfic anymore, mostly because I don't have as much investment in any fandom or really the time that I want to put into a story. But I still actually really enjoy hearing about different people's writing processes. I listen to a lot of podcasts that interview writers, and I think a lot of the things that I've learned can translate well into how scientists learn to talk and write and present their research. It isn't easy talking about ideas that, you know, you might need to have an undergrad or PhD to completely understand. Learning how to translate that to an audience that doesn't have all of that information, it can be difficult, but it shouldn't be impossible. Like, we should be better at talking to people about our work. Like, we should be able to communicate how we're doing what we're doing, why we're doing it, even if we can't get into all of the mechanics. And I think by kind of opening up ourselves to the criticism and to the idea that we need to write something badly first or like give ourselves space to improve on, I think those can be incredibly valuable for finding ways to get better. So tell me what you thought. You feel like, I don't know, any of the kind of things that you've done outside of your work for fun have helped you out. I fixated on reading and writing here, but I can think of other things like sports that kind of help me survive the shithole that is grad school. My cat has also helped me survive grad school. Yeah, I just think it would be interesting to learn how people in different fields and different areas, in different jobs, kind of use things that are outside of those to, like, not just strike a work-life balance, but to actually get, like, I don't know, some feedback between the two. So, bye!